Shalom, 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 Israel. This is Captain Paul Israel from Kingdom Builders of Israel LLC, and today's class topic is going to be on "It's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity," part 3. Okay, Israel, this is going to be the part 3 lesson of "It's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity," part 3. So Israel, get out a pen and notepad because this is going to be another good lesson concerning about this Sabbath day understanding when it pertains to doing well on the Sabbath days, which is basically a form of working on the Sabbath days based upon being in captivity situation. So this is going to give the justification in certain emergency matters concerning doing well or doing a form of work on the Sabbath days, okay, while in captivity. Okay, so this is the proper breakdown understanding series to this particular topic. Okay, Israel. So again, we left off in the part 2 lesson of "It's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity" video. In the part 2 lesson, we left off with the understanding that Yahshua Mashiach was having a conversation with those Pharisees in the field pertaining to those disciples that was found plucking ears of the corn on the Sabbath day by those Pharisees. So now after Yahshua the Mashiach is finished with his conversation with those Pharisees, now he's going to proceed to the next location in Israel where he's going to be basically going inside the synagogue where the Jews always resorted to fellowship at on the Sabbath day. Okay, and of course you're going to have a section of those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees inside this particular synagogue on this particular Sabbath day understanding, okay, because they were supposed to be the leaders of Israel of this time, okay, when Yahshua Mashiach was on earth at this time. So again, the leadership of this time around Yahshua Mashiach's time frame entailed the leadership of the Pharisees, scribes, and the Sadducees. Okay, so this is who Yahshua Mashiach is going to be basically going back and forth with as far as in conversation when he's going inside this particular synagogue on the Sabbath day understanding, based upon him leaving from the field with those disciples. Okay, as far as in that field understanding. So now, of course, in general, we know those disciples are going to basically follow after Christ, the Black Messiah, into that synagogue on the Sabbath day. But this is just basically a transition from once Yahshua Mashiach was in that field with the disciples, now he's going to be in that synagogue with his disciples. Okay, so this is the understanding. Okay, this is the understanding. Okay, so now we're going to start out with this understanding, Israel. In the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 9, it says, "And when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue." So again, Matthew is explaining that Yahshua Mashiach departed from that field after he was conversating with those Pharisees about those disciples that followed Christ. So Yahshua Mashiach finished the conversation about those Pharisees, explaining to those Pharisees that the disciples were still righteous even though they was found plucking the ears of the corn on the Sabbath day. So once Yahshua had completed the understanding to those Pharisees in the field, he left to now go to the synagogue in Israel where those Jews always resorted into fellowshipping at on the Sabbath day. Okay, so that's what it's saying. So now we're going to get to the understanding. So that's why Matthew explained that Yahshua Mashiach went into their synagogue, because those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees always was in the synagogues on the Sabbath day. Okay, so that's what it's explaining there. Okay. Matthew chapter 12, verse 10. Okay. It says, "And behold, there was a man which had his hand withered, and they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days, that they might accuse him? So you see this, Israel? So what it's saying is that there was a particular man that was in this particular synagogue that had like a withering hand. Okay, his hand looked like it was folded in, like he had like a handicapped hand, basically. That's what it's saying. When it says hand withered, it's talking about his hand appeared to be handicapped. Okay, looked like it was folded in. This particular man could not extend his hand because it was handicapped. Okay, so that's what it's saying. Hand withered is talking about this particular man hand was handicapped. Okay, it says, and behold, there was a man which had his hand withered, and they asked him, saying, so these are those Pharisees, right, or those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, right, asking the black Messiah a particular question. Okay, this is what those Pharisees or those scribes or Sadducees are going to ask this particular man named Christ, because Yahshua the Mashiach had walked into their synagogue. Okay, because again, those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees were the leaders of the time of Israel. So this is their organization going on and structure, how they did things in Israel in these synagogues. So Yahshua the Mashiach is about to answer their particular question, okay, later on. But this is one of the questions that those Pharisees had, or those particular men of leadership in the synagogue had for the black Messiah. Okay, they say, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? So this is going to those leaders that was in Israel, known as the Pharisees, understanding. Okay, because this is who Yahshua the Mashiach was constantly dealing with on this particular Sabbath day, understanding. Okay, so we're going to go about understanding that these Pharisees are asking him this particular question. But even though you had the Sadducees and the scribes constantly asking Yahshua the Mashiach different questions in different instances in the understanding of the Gospels understanding, okay? This is what one of the questions that the Pharisees had for the black Messiah. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? So again, these Pharisees asked Yahshua the Mashiach this particular question so they can corner him to basically judge Yahshua the Mashiach, because it's already a known fact that on the seventh day or the Sabbath day, there's not supposed to be no form of work on the Sabbath day to be done. But Yahshua the Mashiach is going to do a wise decision making on judging the matter or judging the circumstances, okay, in this matter when it pertains to this particular man having a withered hand or an handicapped hand, okay? So watch Yahshua the Mashiach response that he's going to give back to those Pharisees, okay? Because those Pharisees were wicked men trying to corner Yahshua the Mashiach and trying to prove to the rest of the Hebrew Israelites that was in the synagogue to show that Yahshua the Mashiach was basically going to commit a sin, which of course in general Yahshua the Mashiach is not going to commit a sin in this understanding, okay, by healing this man on the Sabbath day. But again, those Pharisees didn't really have understanding of Yahweh's law, statutes, and commandments, okay? So Yahshua the Mashiach is going to prove these men wrong, okay? Yahshua the Mashiach, the black Messiah, is going to prove that these men were in the wrong of understanding, okay? So now we're going to go to the next verse. Matthew chapter 12, verse 11. So this is Yahshua the Mashiach's response to those particular Pharisees that asked him a question pertaining to, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? Okay. Matthew chapter 12, verse 11. And he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? So Yahshua the Mashiach is basically responding to those Pharisees in a parable understanding. So Yahshua the Mashiach is responding. That's why we see here is red letters. So Yahshua responds to those Pharisees was saying this. what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? So again, so Yahshua the Mashiach is cornering those Pharisees because he knows what the response is supposed to be pertaining to this particular parable of understanding or particular question. Okay, because it's already a known fact that if one person's sheep fell into a pit on the Sabbath day, you know, in general, a man is going to try to pull that sheep out of the pit because that sheep was supposed to be done or supposed to be a form of something given over for a sacrifice on the Sabbath day, or that sheep was supposed to what? Be a part of that herd or flock of that particular man's property. Okay, so again, in general, you know, if a sheep falls into a pit, you already know you're going to try to pull it out the pit because that's your property. That's money right there. Okay, so that's a form of work, as you can see, that you must do so you can save your sheep. You're not going to just leave your sheep in the pit by itself and just walk away because it's Sabbath day. You're going to pull it out of the pit because it's an emergency situation, because this is your money. All right, this is your form of sacrifice that you may have to give over to the priesthood, right? So these are things that you have to do, this is things that you have to pertain to when it pertains to on the Sabbath day understanding. So Yahshua Mashiach is cornering the Pharisees and showing that, hey, you got to do a form of work because this is your sheep. This is your property. You're not going to just leave your property that you pay money for into no pit. You're not going to just leave it in no pit by itself and just walking away. You're going to pull it out, even though it's on the Sabbath day. Okay? That's what it says. Will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? So it's just common sense that any animal that falls into a pit that's pertaining to the property of that particular man, that man basically is going to try to pull it out. It's just common sense. He's going to try to pull it out the pit, basically, even though it's on the Sabbath day. Okay, so this is what Yahshua is explaining. Because why? It's an emergency circumstance. Okay, this is an emergency situation that must have to happen because this is that particular man's property that fell into the pit. Okay, and it's righteous to pull the sheep out of the pit. Okay, it's a righteous thing to do, even though it's on the Sabbath day, because it was not something done intentionally. Okay, this is just something that has to happen. You have to lift it out. Okay, Matthew chapter 12, verse 12. Okay, Matthew chapter 12, verse 12. This is Yahshua the Mashiach also asking another question or making a statement towards to those Pharisees. Okay, Matthew chapter 12, verse 12. How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. You see this, Israel? So the point of Yahshua making that statement, saying how much then is a man better than a sheep, because we know in general the creatures of the earth were formed, right, on the sixth day. And also mankind, male and female, were formed on the sixth day as well. So that's why Yahshua the Mashiach is saying, how much then is a man better than a sheep? So the same care that you would give to somebody as a human being that fell into the pit, you're going to try to pull them out the pit on the Sabbath day, right? If a man or a woman fell into the pit, you're not just going to walk over that particular person that fell into the pit, right? You're going to try to pull that person out the pit. So the same analogy you're going to do with an animal, right? The same analogy you're going to do with this sheep or cattle or whatever type of animal you could think of. You're going to try to pull this particular sheep or any type of animal out of this pit, because it's a righteous thing to do, even though it's on the Sabbath day. Okay, because it's like in basically an emergency situation. So this is why Yahshua Mashiach says, wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Point blank, period. So Yahshua Mashiach cut up those Pharisees with their question. Okay, because they was trying to corner Yahshua the Mashiach on a certain response that they was going to say, see, you're breaking the Sabbath with your understanding. No. Yahshua answered this response well, because it's lawful and it's righteous to pull that sheep or to pull that animal out that pit, even though it's on the Sabbath day, because it's a righteous thing to do, because this sheep or cattle needs to be saved. The same equivalent, if a man or woman fell into a pit, you're not going to walk past that male or female in that pit because it's the Sabbath day. You're going to try to do what you could do to save that person's life. Point blank, period. Okay, so this is why Yahshua says, wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. So again, Israel, this is why I did this lesson, that it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity. Because even though Yahshua the Mashiach is giving this response, it's already understood that the Israelites was in captivity under the Roman Empire. Okay, so that's what it's implying as well. Okay, but Yahshua is explaining this is a righteous work. So just like the Hebrew Israelites of modern day times, they are doing a form of righteous work so they can be able to take care of their bills. Okay, because if they don't get out there and work and get on the grind during this hard economical times, they're going to be out on the street struggling to survive. And then going into further sin. Okay, so the Hebrew Israelites have to use wisdom. You have to work to survive. But again, these modern Hebrew Israelites are acting like they're not in captivity. They're acting like they have millions of dollars in the bank where they don't have to work like that. Okay, they have the appearance of being overly righteous, but when we open up their door, they're falling short all over the place in the midst of sin. Okay, so this is why we have to let this Bible be true and every man a liar. Okay, so again, Yahshua says, wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. So this is what the Bible says. We're going to go off what the Black Messiah says. We're not going to go off these wicked Hebrew Israelites trying to judge somebody if they do have to work on the Sabbath day. Okay, we're going to go off what Yahshua the Mashiach says, because he is the Lord of the Sabbath days. Not these wicked Hebrew Israelites that's claiming to be the leaders of the Hebrew Israelites. Yahshua the Mashiach is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. So we're going to listen to what Yahshua the Mashiach says. He said it's lawful to do well. It's lawful to do work on the Sabbath days when it pertains to emergency situations. Okay? When it pertains to emergency situations. So in modern day times, Hebrew Israelites have to work to survive as an emergency situation. Okay? So we're going to go what Christ says. So this is a cut to you Hebrew Israelites telling your people that you come across that they're going off, they're in the midst of sin because they have to work on the Sabbath to take care of their bills. You're going off. You're in the midst of sin, you Hebrew Israelites, for rebuking righteous men and women that's trying to aspire to do right according to this Bible. Okay, so you Hebrew Israelites that's pushing that doctrine that you're going off because you're working on the Sabbath, even though you know we're in captivity. But yet you want to project that you're righteous and everybody's wicked because they're working on the Sabbath day. You're going off. So this is a cut unto you Hebrew Israelites and your false doctrines that y'all putting out there in the earth. Okay, we're going to let this Bible be true and every man a liar. Yahshua says it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Point blank, period. So it's lawful to work on the Sabbath days based upon an emergency circumstances, because these Hebrew Israelites have to pay for their bills. Hebrew Israelites got to survive out here. Okay? So again, you Hebrew Israelites, now you're hearing out of Christ's mouth what is the proper understanding on how to do well on the Sabbath day. Okay? Point blank, period. We're going to listen to what the Black Messiah says. We're not going to listen to Hebrew Israelites that don't know this Bible. Okay? So, Matthew chapter 12, verse 13. It says, then said he to the man. So this is, of course, Yahshua the Mashiach now going to have a conversation with that man that had that withering hand. Okay? Because that man with the withering hand, was astonished that, he was in the presence of Yahshua the Mashiach. And also, he was astonished to be in the presence of that synagogue, because the Hebrew Israelites used to look down on individuals that had some type of element as far as an illness or a disease back then. Okay. Matthew chapter 12, verse 13 again. Then said he to the man, stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. So again, Yahshua the Mashiach said unto that man that had the withering hand, stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole. So now that particular man hand was able to what? Form into what? A full hand stretched out. Okay, because generally that hand was a withering hand or an handicapped hand. Okay. And it says like as the other, because this particular man had a good other hand. Okay, so now he had both workable hands. Okay, as you can see, Yahshua the Mashiach healed this man on the Sabbath day because it was a righteous thing to do. And also it was an emergency because this man had been suffering from this element for years. Okay, Yahshua the Mashiach, it's all about love. Okay, no, Pharisees had a wicked spirit on them to not even want Yahshua the Mashiach to heal this particular man. You got to be wicked as hell. Those Pharisees was wicked men. They did not want to see men of this time other than them to prosper, because those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees only thought about themselves. They didn't think about the rest of the Hebrew Israelites like that. But Yahshua the Mashiach thought about a brother needing help. Okay, because Yahshua the Mashiach is love, right? He's all about love, his righteousness. He's all about Yahweh's commandments. Okay, so Yahshua the Mashiach looked after this fellow Hebrew Israelite, this brother. Okay, that's loving thy neighbor as you love yourself. So Yahshua the Mashiach was applying a law of understanding of looking after a fellow Hebrew Israelite. Those Pharisees were not looking after a fellow Hebrew Israelite because they were wicked men. Same goes to the modern day Hebrew Israelites of today. They're not looking at the Hebrew Israelites, male and female, as working on the Sabbath as a form of emergency circumstances, right? They're not looking at those Hebrew Israelites like that. The modern day Hebrew Israelites are trying to project a form of righteousness, right, by condemning the just, male and female, because they're working on the Sabbath. That's going off. Okay, you're not supposed to do that. Okay, you know why people have to work on the Sabbath, to take care of their bills. But yet Hebrew Israelites of today, they're acting like they don't know that understanding. Right? But they have to get corrected with the right understanding or what the Bible says. So Yahshua the Mashiach healed this particular man on the Sabbath because it was a righteous work. It was a righteous deed to do. Okay? Which those Pharisees couldn't comprehend that understanding. Okay. Matthew chapter 12, verse 14. Then the Pharisees went out and held a council against him, how they might destroy him. You see this, Israel? You see the jealousy of those Pharisees, right? They got upset that Yahshua the Mashiach healed this man on the Sabbath day. You got to have pure hatred, right? Because these Pharisees have a hatred spirit. This is what these modern day Hebrew Israelites are having in their mind now. They have a hatred spirit. They do not want to see other Hebrew Israelites prosper, right? They don't want to see individuals prosper, right? This is what these Pharisees didn't like to see. They didn't like to see somebody doing things that they couldn't do, right? Those Pharisees couldn't heal nobody, right? They couldn't heal nobody, but they knew Yahshua the Mashiach could do it. But they tried to corner Yahshua to say that, oh, this man is wicked because he's doing a form of work on the Sabbath by healing people on the Sabbath. But it turns out that the Pharisees could not condemn Yahshua the Mashiach because Yahshua the Mashiach hit him with that wordplay, hit him with that law of understanding. And those Pharisees didn't have anything to justify their stance and why they was trying to condemn Yahshua the Mashiach on his ministry and on his works. So the Pharisees got upset and now saying, hey, we got to get rid of this man. We got to get rid of the black Messiah. We got to get rid of Yahshua the Mashiach because he's a problem. Because in general, the whole nation of Hebrew Israelites that was in Israel, primarily the southern kingdom, was supposed to go to who? For healing. They were supposed to go to the leadership. They were supposed to go to the leadership of Israel, who were those scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees for healing, right? So those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, they were supposed to, take those sacrifices and do the animal sacrifices to be an atonement for the sins of the people. So if any element of illness was on a particular man or woman, they were supposed to get healed based upon those sacrifices of those priests or those leaders of the nation of Israel. Those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees were the ones that was putting in them orders for those animal sacrifices to be made for the children of Israel. So those leaders who were those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, they was putting in them orders for those sacrifices to be made, of course, by the Levite priests. Okay, but the ones that was in charge of the time in Israel at this time in the New Testament was those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees. So they was the ones that had to put that order into the Levite priests as far as putting in the understanding of those animal sacrifices for the children of Israel. And this is why you had people that were suffering from certain elements were always being found in either the synagogue or found always around these particular leaders of this time, as far as those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, because they had to go through these men, in order for those sacrifices to be made unto them, okay, in Israel, because these men had set themselves up to be the leaders of the people, okay? So this is the understanding, this is the understanding again that the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees were the ones that were basically running Israel under the understanding of course, in general, under the Roman Empire's control. Okay, because those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees were working for the Roman Empire. Okay, as far as keeping the Hebrew Israelites in check. Okay, in general, at this time, you had wicked leadership in charge of ruling over Israel at this time. Okay, so this is why these particular men, the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, had a problem with Yahshua the Mashiach, the black Messiah, because Yahshua the Mashiach was righteous, point blank, period. But Yahshua the Mashiach is able to heal people without the regard of using the Pharisees or those scribes and Sadducees. Yahshua the Mashiach was able to heal individuals without the help of those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees. And those scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees didn't like that. So they was like, hey, we got to get rid of this Yahshua the Mashiach. Okay, because he's making us look stupid. He's making us seem like we don't know what we're talking about. And that's what you'll have with these modern day Hebrew Israelites. Okay, when the Most High sends the prophets to the earth, right? Just like he sent Yahshua to the earth, right? They roll with a different type of spirit than the rest of the Hebrew Israelites as a whole, as far as the ones that saying that they are the leaders of the nation of Israel. So a lot of modern day Hebrew Israelites of leadership do not like certain spirits that the Yahweh sends to the earth, because those certain spirits have the right spirit of understanding. But those modern Hebrew Israelites of today, they have a jealous and hatred spirit to those individuals that's able to interpret certain breakdowns of the scriptures. That's what the Pharisees had issue with Christ on, because Yahshua the Mashiach was able to corner those Pharisees and expose that, hey, these Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees, they really don't know what they're talking about. They really do not know what they're talking about. It's just like what we have with the gist of the modern day Hebrew Israelite of leadership of today. They really don't know what they're talking about to a certain degree. Certain things that they're teaching is falsified doctrines. Okay? And a lot of times when Yahweh sends the prophets, or he sent Yahshua the Mashiach, guess what? These particular men of the right understanding of Yahweh's righteousness, they expose these false doctrines. They expose these false leaders. Okay? And these leaders have a problem with them being exposed. So to stop the exposure, they have to get these individuals removed. So this is what the understanding of those Pharisees was trying to do with Christ. They had to get rid of Christ so they can come off like they have all the knowledge. Yahweh is only dealing with those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees. That's the understanding that these Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees wanted the whole house of Israel to know. So Yahshua the Mashiach is exposing these guys as being fakes, frauds, people that don't need to be in leadership. Okay? But Yahshua the Mashiach is righteous. He's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Not no Pharisees, not no Sadducees, and not no scribes. They was imposters. They put them own selves in that position to be leaders for the people. And also those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees pledged their allegiance to the Roman Empire, which is wicked as hell to do. Okay? So again, those Pharisees plotted out in this understanding in Matthew chapter 12, verse 14, to what? Kill the black Messiah. That was their plan. Because Yahshua the Mashiach, the black Messiah, was righteous. And of course, in general, the Pharisees were not righteous. They were wicked men. Matthew chapter 12, verse 15. But when Yahshua knew it, he withdrew himself from thence, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. You see this, Israel? So Yahshua the Mashiach knew the thoughts of these Pharisees. He heard and understood that these men are plotting to kill me. So let me get up out of this synagogue, which that's what Yahshua did. He got up out of the synagogue because he knows and heard the thoughts of these particular men who were the Pharisees, that they was plotting to kill the black Messiah. Okay, so Yahshua the Mashiach removed himself from this synagogue location. And great multitudes followed him. So when Yahshua the Mashiach left that synagogue, great multitudes followed after him. And he healed them all because they realized, hold up, Yahshua the Mashiach is the powerhouse. Yahshua the Mashiach don't have to do no animal sacrifices to what? Atone for our sins so we can be healed. Yahshua the Mashiach is that Son of the Most High as he presented himself to be. But Yahshua the Mashiach was low key in presenting himself as being the Son of the Most High. Okay, but notice the people didn't go to those Pharisees. They followed after Christ. So again, those Pharisees did not like that understanding. They didn't like the aspect of them not being catered to, right? Those Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees wanted the glory. But now the recognition is going to the Son of the Most High, who is Yahshua Mashiach. And those scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees got jealous, hatred. So that's why they had that council to try to overthrow Christ. Okay, as you can see, the multitudes followed Christ. It didn't say the multitudes followed those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees, did it? It said the multitudes followed Christ because they found out, oh, Christ is the one healing people. Why are we going to go to those Pharisees? They can't even heal nobody. So Yahshua Mashiach was messing up the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes' business. Okay, because those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees were making big money off the Israelites. Okay, because you had to go to them to get those sacrifices of animal, goats, and stuff like that for the atonement. Okay, for your sins of understanding. But Yahshua Mashiach, he was doing the healing. He was recognized as that righteous man. Pharisees couldn't have that. So they was like, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. But Yahshua Mashiach still showed love to his people, as you can see, and he healed them all that followed him. Okay, that's what those people reward was, because they followed after him. So he healed them all that followed him, because that's the love of Yahshua Mashiach, the Black Messiah. Yahshua Mashiach is a righteous judge. So he healed those that wanted to follow him. So Yahshua Mashiach was not just healing random people, but he was healing people that sought the healing, right? That sought him to know that, okay, this man is able to do miracles because they believe. So Yahshua, the Mashiach, was focused on healing people that believed. Okay, point blank, period. Luke chapter 6, verse 6. Luke chapter 6, verse 6. This is a different Sabbath day than what we just read earlier when Yahshua left the field and went to the synagogue. Okay, this is a separate understanding of another Sabbath day. Okay, so this is Luke writing this understanding, and we know Luke was one of the disciples of the Black Messiah. Okay, so this is Luke chapter 6, verse 6. It says, and it came to pass also on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught. And there was a man whose right hand was withered. So this is another instance where you had a different man who had a hand that was withered. And it said which hand was withered, and it was his right hand. So this was a different man than what we read the previous time. Okay, so this was a different man that was in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and his hand was withered, because in this instance, on this Sabbath day, Yahshua Mashiach, he was teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Okay, notice Yahshua Mashiach is not teaching on Sunday. As you can see, you don't see Yahshua Mashiach teaching on that Sunday, doing Sunday worship. You don't see Yahshua Mashiach doing Sunday worship, do you? Right? You see Yahshua Mashiach teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, which is that 7th day of the week understanding. Okay, not the first day of the week. So again, this right here is a cut to the Christians of today, because the Christians of today saying they followers of Christ, but yet followers of Christ, they supposed to be keeping the Sabbath day. Right? Nowhere in this Bible you see the word Sunday worship. So Yahshua Mashiach was not doing Sunday worship. Yahshua Mashiach was keeping the Sabbath day. Okay, so this is a cut to the Christianity faith by doing that Sunday worship, which is not in this Bible. Okay, so we're going to let this Bible be true and every man a liar. It says, and it came to pass also on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught. So Yahshua Mashiach taught in the synagogue on the 7th day, which is that Sabbath. Okay, and there was a man whose right hand was withered. So there was another brother, right, whose hand was withered, or his hand was handicapped. So this particular man had a hand that was handicapped. Okay, that's what it's saying. Okay, that's what it's saying. Luke chapter 6 verse 7. And the scribes and Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find an accusation against him. You see this, Israel? So the Pharisees always tried to find an accusation against the black Messiah to make it be known that, oh, the black Messiah don't know what he's talking about, or Yahshua Mashiach that don't know what he's talking about, right? This is what the Pharisees wanted to do. They was always trying to corner the black Messiah. So notice it says, and the scribes and Pharisees. So at different instances, like I said earlier, you'll have the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees in different instances trying to corner the black Messiah or trying to accuse him of committing a sin on a particular Sabbath day understanding. This is what those wicked men of leadership at the time was trying to do to the black Messiah. Okay. And the scribes and Pharisees watched him. They was watching him, trying to catch him in the midst of sin, right? Whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find an accusation against him. So they was trying to catch Yahshua Mashiach committing a sin. Okay, but again, we already established that it's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. It's lawful to do a form of healing on the Sabbath day. Okay, based upon an emergency situation, based upon loving thy neighbor as you love thyself. Okay. This is the understanding that those Pharisees, those scribes, and those Sadducees did not have the understanding of the love of the Most High. They didn't have the love or the understanding of loving their people. Okay? They just took on having a title as being the leaders of the nation of Israel. Okay? They just took on titles. Just like the modern day Hebrew Israelites of today, they take on these titles, elder, priest, deacon, all these different titles, or pope or bishop. These are just titles of man. Okay. But they don't have the aspect of the love for the children of Israel like they supposed to have. But Yahshua Mashiach has the love of his people, the Hebrew Israelites, because he's focused on healing. I've seen a fellow Hebrew Israelite in pain and suffering, so I'm going to heal this man. But those Pharisees, those scribes, and those Sadducees could care less about that understanding. Luke chapter 6 verse 8. Luke chapter 6 verse 8. But he knew their thoughts and said to the man which had the withering hand. So now Yahshua Mashiach is knowing and hearing the thoughts of those Pharisees and scribes and those Sadducees. He's hearing the understanding that pertains to their logical reason of understanding. But in this instance, this understanding is just pertaining to the thoughts of those scribes and Sadducees in the understanding that Luke is writing about. But he knew their thoughts and said to the man which had the withering hand, rise up and stand forth in the midst. And he arose and stood forth. So now, this particular man who heard Christ the Black Messiah say, hey, rise up, stand forth in the midst, like meaning stand up in the midst of the people. Meaning stand up in the midst of the people. And he arose and stood forth. Now Yahshua Mashiach is going to eventually heal this particular man that stood up. Okay? And Yahshua Mashiach is going to do this miracle in front of those scribes and Pharisees understanding. Luke chapter 6 verse 9. Then said Yahshua unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? Whoa, wait a minute. You see this, Israel? You see the question that Yahshua Mashiach answered those scribes and those Pharisees on? It says, then said Yahshua unto them. Now this is Yahshua Mashiach speaking to those scribes and those Pharisees that was in that synagogue. Okay? That was going to witness the understanding of this healing understanding of this fellow Hebrew Israelite brother, okay, with that withering hand, okay. But this is the question that Yahshua Mashiach is asking those scribes and Pharisees on. He's saying, hey, is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? So, in general, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, and it's not lawful to do evil on the Sabbath day. So he says to save life. So it is lawful, according to the Bible, to save somebody's life on the Sabbath day, right? And then it says, or to destroy it. And you know, of course, in general, it's not lawful to destroy a life on the Sabbath day. It's not lawful to do that. So Yahshua the Mashiach is putting a spin to the understanding. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good? Yes, the Pharisees, the scribes know that. Or to do evil. The scribes, the Pharisees know that it's not lawful to do evil on the Sabbath day. It says to save life. So to save life, those Pharisees and scribes know it's lawful to do that understanding as far as saving somebody's life on the Sabbath day, right? Because that's lawful. That's a good and righteous thing to do. Or to destroy it. Those scribes and Pharisees know that it's not lawful to destroy somebody's life on the Sabbath day. When it says to destroy it, that's going into killing somebody. It's not lawful to kill somebody on the Sabbath day. Basically, that's basically what it's saying. Because the whole notion is saving somebody's life, okay? Not to basically destroy somebody's life. But the Pharisees, scribes know that it's not lawful to destroy somebody's life when it pertains to the Sabbath days, okay? The scribes and Pharisees know that it's not lawful to destroy somebody's life on the Sabbath day. But those Pharisees and scribes, they know it's lawful to what? Save somebody's life on the Sabbath day. Okay, so this is what Yahshua is going to do. He's making it known that it's lawful to do well on the Sabbath day. Point blank, period. So basically, if you fast forward up today in modern day times, it's lawful for a Hebrew Israelite man and woman to work on the Sabbath when it pertains to what? Taking care of your bills. Okay, that is a good thing to do. Okay. An evil thing to do on the Sabbath would be what? Doing other things outside of that emergency circumstances understanding. Okay, when you trying to do what? Celebrate your birthday on the weekend. That's evil, right? We ain't supposed to be celebrating birthdays. Okay, so that's just one prime example. And then it says to save somebody's life. So on the Sabbath day, let's say somebody's having a heart attack on the Sabbath day. Are you not going to call 911 to help this person get to the hospital on the Sabbath day? You know good and well you're going to call 911 to help save this person's life on the Sabbath day, because that's a righteous form of work to do on the Sabbath day, because you're saving somebody's life. Now, to destroy somebody's life is to know that this particular person is having a heart attack, and you're saying, oh, well, it's a Sabbath day. I'm not going to call 911 so this person can get medical attention. That's evil. Okay, so we cannot listen to wicked Hebrew Israelites that's coming with that ignorant, foolish of understanding of Yahweh's laws. Okay, that's why a lot of people who claim to be Hebrew Israelites are not fit to be in leadership positions, because they're putting people in a constraint of destroying themselves. Okay, so again, this is why the Bible always tries to get the Hebrew Israelites to be wise and understanding. Okay, so we just got to look at the logic of what Christ is saying. So I just did that modern day understanding to give a certain analogy so you Hebrew Israelites can comprehend what's being said in modern day times compared to what Yahshua Mashiach was saying in times past. Okay, that's what he's basically saying in the same logic. Okay, go to the next verse. Luke chapter 6 verse 10. And looking round about upon them all, he said unto the man, stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored whole as the other. So you see this, Israel. So Yahshua Mashiach healed this man that had the withering right hand. Okay, and of course Yahshua Mashiach healed this man in front of the midst of the Hebrew Israelites and also those scribes and Pharisees. So Yahshua Mashiach did this miracle in front of those scribes and Pharisees, those men that was in leadership for him at that time, and embarrassed those men, because those men really didn't have understanding of Yahweh's laws. That's what Yahshua Mashiach was pointing out on those men, because they didn't have the love of their people like they were supposed to have. Okay, because they knew it was a righteous thing to what? Heal a man that's been struggling in certain instances in his life. Those Pharisees and the scribes knew that Yahshua Mashiach did a righteous deed by healing this man that had the withering hand. That's why they didn't have a rebuttal against Yahshua Mashiach after he made those statements earlier. And then he healed this particular man that had the withering hand to now have a regular hand just like his other hand. Okay? So this man was healed in front of the midst of the people that was in this synagogue. And those Pharisees and scribes did not like that understanding because they was all about themselves. Them scribes and Pharisees were wicked men all about themselves. Just like you have a lot of modern Hebrew Israelites of leadership, they do not want to see the Hebrew Israelites as a whole nation prosper. Okay? The modern day Hebrew Israelite leadership, they only primarily care about themselves primarily, not really thinking about the nation of Israel. That's what the scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees was thinking about. They was only thinking about themselves. So Yahshua Mashiach was thinking about his brothers and sisters. He was thinking about his people. Okay? The Hebrew Israelites. Okay, so that's the difference in an understanding. That Yahshua Mashiach had more love for the nation of Israel than those wicked scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees did. Okay? Luke chapter 6 verse 11. And they were filled with madness and communed one with another what they might do to Yahshua. You see this, Israel? So again, you had another instance that those scribes, Pharisees, understanding, wanted to kill Yahshua Mashiach. Because Yahshua Mashiach kept, exposing those Pharisees, and those scribes and those Sadducees falsified doctrines. Okay, he proved that they didn't know what they really was teaching. They really didn't have comprehension of the law, right? They really didn't know the laws of the Most High, right? This is what Yahshua Mashiach was exposing to the rest of the Hebrew Israelites, that those wicked scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees really didn't have the right spirit when it came to knowing about Yahweh's laws, statutes, and commandments. Okay? And Yahshua Mashiach kept pointing this out in different instances. So again, the anger was getting built up, amongst the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, because they was getting angered because Yahshua Mashiach kept basically exposing them in different instances. Okay? So again, this is why they commune with one another what they might do to Yahshua. Okay? Because Yahshua the Mashiach was putting them on blast, exposing their false doctrines. And that's what the prophets of this Bible were all about. Exposing the false doctrines of these Hebrew Israelites that's in leadership form. Because these Hebrew Israelites in leadership form, they're not really coming with thus saith the Most High. They coming with thus saith in their own heart. They coming up with their own falsified doctrine analogy of the scriptures. Okay? But the people that's supposed to be walking in the right spirit are those that follow Christ. Those that walk in Yahweh's righteousness of understanding. That's focused more on the word. Not really focused on titles and all this other stuff. So you Hebrew Israelites, you have to beware of these Hebrew Israelites that's all about putting them titles on themselves. Just focus on the ministry, focus on the word. That's it. That's all you're supposed to be focused on, you Hebrew Israelites. Okay? So now we're going to go to the understanding of an incident where Yahshua the Mashiach had a run-in with those Pharisees again on a different Sabbath. Okay, so this is not on the same Sabbath day that he was teaching in that synagogue on. This is a understanding where Yahshua the Mashiach had went to visit one of the chief men that was a Pharisee. So he went to one of the chief Pharisees' house to fellowship for a period of time. Okay, this is a different Sabbath that he did this on compared to the other two Sabbaths that we talked about from earlier. Okay, Luke chapter 14 verse 1. And it came to pass as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. So again, you had other Pharisees there at the house of this chief Pharisee. Because not all the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees were wicked, but you had majority of them were. But you had certain individuals that were amongst the Pharisees or the scribes and Sadducees had taken a liking towards Yahshua Mashiach, right? They took a liking towards Yahshua Mashiach and his teachings and his aura and how he delivered himself or how he handled himself amongst those other leaders that was a part of those Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes. Okay, but again, you had other men of leadership that was amongst this particular group in this particular Pharisee understanding that took a liking to Christ and invited him to his house. Okay, but of course, in general, you're going to have other Pharisees in the midst of this understanding because why? This is the Sabbath day. And we know Pharisees in general are going to stick with each other as far as fellowshipping pertaining to the Sabbath day understanding. And notice, of course, in general, you're not going to see Yahshua Mashiach cooking, right? Yahshua Mashiach is just observed, just eating bread. Okay. And it came to pass as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day that they watched him. So as you can see, Yahshua Mashiach didn't go to this chief Pharisee house to cook any food. Okay. He just went there to fellowship and to eat bread. Okay. Because Yahshua Mashiach kept Yahweh's commandments. Okay. Point blank, period. Luke chapter 14 verse 2. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. So again, there was a certain man before him that had a dropsy. So it was a particular man that had a certain illness, right? That was in the house of the chief Pharisee's house. Okay, because the chief Pharisee had other men that was there. Okay, so in this instance, you have a particular man that's struggling with a certain type of illness that was inside this chief Pharisee's house. Okay. There was a certain man before him which had a dropsy. So we got to find out what is this word dropsy is getting into. What type of illness is this? Okay. It says dropsy. This is the definition of dropsy. It says dropsy. Let me zoom in. It says in medicine, an unnatural collection of water in and a part of the body, proceeding from a greater effusion of serum by the inhaling arteries. Then the absorbents take up. It occurs most frequently in persons of lax habits or in bodies debilitated by disease. The dropsy takes different names according to the part affected, as ascites or dropsy of the abdomen, hydrocephalus or water in the head, anasarca or a watery swelling over the whole body. So if somebody has dropsy, it's known that they're struggling with an element that swells up certain body parts. Okay, primarily the leg or the ankle area. Okay, we're gonna give an example. Another word for dropsy is going to be edema. Okay, another word for dropsy would be edema. And we're going to get this understanding off of Wikipedia understanding. Okay. Edema. Okay. We're going to zoom in a little bit. Edema. It says edema, also spelled odema, and also known as fluid retention. Dropsy. That's the word again. Dropsy. So another word for dropsy would be edema. It says dropsy, hydropsy, and swelling is the buildup of fluid in the body's tissue. Most commonly, the legs or arms are affected. Symptoms may include skin which feels tight, the area may feel heavy, and joint stiffness. Other symptoms depend on the underlying cause. So as also we zoom out, let me zoom out, let me back up. Let me zoom in. Causes of dropsy or edema. It says causes may include venous insufficiency, heart failure, kidney problems, low protein levels, liver problems, deep vein thrombosis, infections, angioedema, certain medication, and lymphedema. It may also occur in immobile patients, stroke, spinal cord injury, aging, or with temporary immobility such as prolonged sitting or standing, and during menstruation or pregnancy. The condition is more concerning if it starts suddenly or pain or shortness of breath is present. So in general, this is mainly what the causes that somebody can develop dropsy or edema, okay, based upon a venous insufficiency or heart failure, kidney problem, low protein levels, liver problems, deep vein thrombosis, infections. And I also had researched dropsy or edema. You can develop dropsy or edema based upon having too much salt in your diet as well. Okay, so that's the understanding I just wanted to bring out what the dropsy entails. So again, this is the other understanding of edema. Understanding, as you can see, it's like a swellingness of the leg area. They say it can be swellingness in the arm area too. It's like a water fluid understanding where it forms a form of swelling in the body. Okay, that's what it's getting into. This is what this particular man in the book of Luke chapter 14 verse 2 was struggling with. Okay, he had possibly other health issues which developed into him having dropsy based upon having other serious health issues. Okay, so this particular man was there at the chief Pharisee house. So this particular man had this particular element going on with himself having the dropsy when he was, of course, at this particular chief Pharisee's house. Okay, this is what type of man Yahshua the Mashiach was observing there at the chief Pharisee's house. Okay, so after Yahshua the Mashiach observed this particular man having a dropsy in this particular house of the chief Pharisee's house, understanding, this is a question that Yahshua the Mashiach is going to ask these Pharisees and also these men of leadership of this time. He's going to ask this particular question pertaining to the healing on the Sabbath day, understanding. Luke chapter 14 verse 3. And Yahshua answering spake unto the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? So this is a question that Yahshua had with the leaders of Israel at this time. And when it says lawyers, that's going into somebody that's skilled in Yahweh's laws. And so Yahshua is pondering a question to men that was supposed to be skilled in knowing Yahweh's laws, and Pharisees. So this is another group of individuals that Yahshua was asking this question to. Okay, that's what it's saying. So we're going to prove that where it says lawyers, this is not talking about like in general like your modern day term of lawyers, but this is going to the biblical lawyer understanding of somebody that was skilled in knowing Yahweh's laws. Okay, so this is King James Version Dictionary definition on lawyer. It says one versed in the laws, or a practitioner of the law, one whose profession is to institute suits in courts of law and to prosecute or to defend the cause of clients. This is a general term comprehending attorneys, counselors, solicitors, barristers, surgeons, and advocates. So again, that's the more modernized term, but really this is really going into one versed in laws of the Most High, okay, or a practitioner of the law. Okay, so this is the question that Yahshua the Mashiach is asking men that's supposed to be real skilled in knowing Yahweh's law, statutes, and commandments. Okay, Luke chapter 14 verse 4. And they held their peace, and he took him and healed him and let him go. Whoa, wait a minute. As you can see, Israel, notice who was in the room at this chief Pharisee house. You had lawyers, people that supposed to be skilled in knowing Yahweh's commandments from top to bottom. And also you had that group of the Pharisees that was there at this chief Pharisee's house, right? And Yahshua Mashiach asked these particular men that were all there, hey, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And of course, when you go to Luke chapter 14, verse 4, and they held their peace, meaning they didn't have a rebuttal to say against what Yahshua asked. They didn't have a rebuttal. They was silent. They was quiet. Why were these men quiet? Because they knew it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath day. Point blank, period. And he took him and healed him and let him go. Where it says he took him, that's talking about Yahshua Mashiach picked this man up. Okay, so now Yahshua picked this man up, healed this man, and then the man walked out of the chief Pharisee's house. Okay, because now this man is healed now. Because in generally, the man that was struggling with this dropsy element was at the chief Pharisee house because he wanted healing. Remember I told you earlier, the Hebrew Israelites had to go to the leaders of Israel to get a form of healing, or to be able to have a possibility of healing. Okay, because these were the leaders of Israel at this time. But notice, once this man was healed, notice when this man that had the dropsy was healed, he didn't need no help from those leaders anymore, who were those Pharisees and the scribes and Sadducees. He didn't need the help from those men no more. He got up and got out of this chief Pharisee's house once he was healed. So this is the issue what those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees had with the Black Messiah. Yahshua Mashiach was taking money away from those leaders who were those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, because the Hebrew Israelites had to go through those leaders to get a form of healing, or the possibility of a form of healing. Okay, that's why this particular man that had the dropsy was at this particular chief's house, because he wanted healing. And they knew it was lawful for a particular man to be healed on the Sabbath. Point blank, period. They knew that. That's why they didn't have a rebuttal against Yahshua Mashiach. Okay? So the same equivalent goes to in modern day time where the Hebrew Israelites have to work on the Sabbath. It's lawful to do that because why? Because the Hebrew Israelites are in captivity. They're working on the Sabbath based upon emergency circumstances. Okay? So it's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity. Point blank, period. As you can see, the men of that time that was supposed to be skilled in knowing Yahweh's commandments did not have a rebuttal to say against the Black Messiah. Just like today, no Hebrew Israelite has a rebuttal against this truth that I'm presenting on this channel. That's why it's very quiet on this particular lesson. Because the Bible is the truth. Point blank, period. So now Yahshua Mashiach is going to ask these particular men of leadership at this particular chief Pharisee's house. He's going to ask the men of leadership a particular question. Okay, because you notice those men of leadership cannot respond a rebuttal against the Black Messiah. Okay, when he asked that first question, now he's going to ask another question. Okay, Luke chapter 14 verse 5, and answered them saying, which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen into a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? So this is a question Yahshua is asking these particular men of leadership, who were, most of them were wicked men. Okay, he was asking the Pharisees, the lawyers, he was asking those scribes and those Sadducees of understanding to say, hey, if you have an ox fall into a pit, or if you have an ass which is going into a donkey, you have a donkey and you have an ox that fall into a pit, will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? He asked these men, are you not going to try to pull your donkey or your ox out from the pit on the Sabbath day? Because that's a righteous thing to do, because again, that pertains to your sacrifices on the Sabbath day. That pertains to your wealth of understanding for your land, for your production on your land, on your property. Okay? And we already know what the response it's supposed to be. And you already know the answer that's running through the Pharisees' mind or those scribes' mind, right? Is going to be yes. We're gonna pull that out of a pit. We're gonna pull our donkey. We're gonna pull our ox out of that pit, because that's money right there. Even though it's the Sabbath day, because it's a righteous thing to do. Because again, you're not gonna leave that in no pit. It just wouldn't make any sense. Okay. Luke chapter 14 verse 6. And they could not answer him again to these things. So again, they was quiet. Those Pharisees, those scribes, right? Those leaders that was in this chief Pharisee house, they was quiet because they knew they would try to pull that ox and that donkey out of that pit, because that's a righteous thing to do. There's no sin in doing that. Okay, that's why they did not answer Yahshua the Mashiach the question. Okay, because by them answering the question, saying yes, it will contradict what those Pharisees and what those Sadducees and what those scribes was trying to say that Christ was doing wrong. So instead of them looking stupid, they just didn't answer the question. They had like, okay, no response. Okay, because they knew Yahshua the Mashiach was speaking good logic and reason. Okay, to justify him doing what he did as far as healing on the Sabbath day. Okay, so again, we're going to go back to the understanding in Matthew chapter 12 verse 12. Okay, again, we're going to go back to the understanding in the book of Matthew chapter 12 verse 12. How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore is it lawful to do well on the Sabbath days? So again, now we got the full understanding that it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days, because in general, it's lawful to do a righteous thing, to pull a sheep out of the pit, right? It's lawful to what? Pull an ox out the pit. It's lawful to pull a donkey out of the pit. Just like if you have a male or female in a pit, it's lawful to try to pull them out of the pit. Okay, because that's a righteous thing to do, even though you will do these things on the Sabbath day. It's a righteous thing. Okay. Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Point blank, period. Luke chapter 6 verse 9 again. Then said Yahshua unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? So again, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath days. Just like it's lawful for the Hebrew Israelites to work on the Sabbath because it pertains to something good, so they can be able to take care of bills. This is just basic common sense. Okay, point blank, period. Luke chapter 14 verse 3. And Yahshua answered spake unto the lawyers and the Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? So again, Yahshua the Mashiach is letting it be known that it is lawful to heal on the Sabbath day. But he's questioning these Pharisees with their understanding. Okay? Because they lack understanding of Yahweh's laws, statutes, and commandments. That's why you see in different instances, he was hounding on certain interpretation of the laws to show that these Pharisees, these scribes and Sadducees, and the leadership of the Israelites were lacking the right understanding of what Yahweh's laws entail. Okay, so Yahshua the Mashiach was exposing the Pharisees, the scribes, and Sadducees' falsified doctrine when it pertains to Yahweh's Sabbath day understanding. Okay. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8. Again, this is Apostle Paul writing this letter of understanding to a brother named Timothy. Okay, 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8. But if any man provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he have denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Whoa, wait a minute. You see this, Israel? So if a man or woman don't provide for his own, he's worse than an infidel. Okay, an infidel is going into you being an unbeliever, because you have to provide for your house. Okay. But in this context, primarily it's talking about a man. Okay. Because the man is the head. But in general, a man and woman have to do the things to maintain their household so they can promote legacy for their children. Okay. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a family, as that form of mother or father situation, to play your role, to put things in action for your children so they can prosper, it says what? You're worse than the infidel. So if you out here telling about, hey, I'm not going to get this job because it entails me to work on a Sabbath, knowing that it pays the amount of money that I need to take care of myself and my kids, but I'm going to take a lower level job because that job allows me to keep the Sabbath based upon not working on the Sabbath. But now in the meantime, I'm struggling and I can barely survive to take care of my children and my wife, or barely can take care of myself. That you're losing in that understanding, because you're supposed to be what? Providing for your own household. Because many jobs that's out here in the world are not catered towards Yahweh's commandments pertaining to Yahweh's Sabbath day, because you are in the land of your captivities, you Hebrew Israelites. Okay, so if you know good and well you need to work on a Sabbath to take care of your children, take care of your wife, and so forth, or to take care of your own financial means, and you may have to work on the Sabbath, you have to do what you have to do. You Hebrew Israelites, stop trying to appear like you're overly righteous when you're not. Okay, because it's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Didn't we just read that from Christ's mouth in red letters? So if you need to take care of yourself, your family, your children, that put food on your table, to pay your bills, you're going to have to work on the Sabbath if you have to. Okay. If you don't have to work on the Sabbath, don't work on the Sabbath. But if you have to, as an emergency circumstance, to take care of yourself, you need to do so. Because if you're not doing the things that you need to do so to take care of yourself, to take care of your wife, to take care of your children, you're worse than the infidel, because you're not doing what you need to do to make sure your family is okay, or to make sure you're okay. Because most of the time, if those individuals are struggling out there to survive in the world, most of the time they are struggling with drugs. Depression. Lust of the world. Whether it be prostitution, whether it be jealous and envy and all this other stuff that can come about with those internal thoughts. Because again, these Hebrew Israelites are living in a wicked world, but they're trying to appear like they're righteous by not working on the Sabbath. But yet you're still going into further sin because you're not having things put in place to keep you grounded, because you're struggling out there in the world. Okay, so you Hebrew Israelites, if you have to work on a Sabbath to take care of yourself, you are permitted to do so. Okay, based upon that Yahweh allowed the children of Israel to have in the land of their captivities. Okay, so again, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he have denied the faith and is worse than the infidel. Because we have Hebrew Israelites that's not trying to take care of themselves financially by them pretending to be a commandment keeper by being off on the Sabbath day, by not working. But again, it's a commandment that you must be able to take care of yourself. You must take care of your family. And also it says he have denied the faith. So you denied the faith by you refusing to take care of what you're supposed to take care of your responsibilities, you Hebrew Israelites, either man or woman. Okay, because it's your job to take care of your house. Okay, your foundation. Because the Most High compares you to being an unbeliever if you're not doing what you need to do to survive. Let's look at the word infidel to get this definition. It says infidel, unbelieving, disbelieving the inspiration of the scriptures or the divine institution of Christianity. Okay, we ain't reading no more of that, but it's really saying unbelieving. Okay, that's what an infidel means, unbelieving. So The Most High compares those individuals that's not taking care of their responsibilities as a man or woman, right, as unbelievers. Your sin is equal to an unbeliever if you're not taking care of yourself, take care of your responsibility that you need to do because you're trying to appear overly righteous, right? You're going off. Okay. So the Most High commands the men and women of the nation of Israel to take care of yourself and also to take care of your children. And the Most High does not favor individuals not taking care of their responsibilities. Okay. The Most High puts you in the same boat as being an unbeliever. And we know unbelievers are not inheriting the kingdom of the Most High. Okay. We know that based upon the book of Revelation chapter 21 verse 8, where it says, but the fearful and unbelieving, right there, that word unbelieving, which is going into that infidel, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. You see this, Israel? So again, the unbelievers, they're going to be a part of that second death analogy. So when we go back to 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8, you don't want to be put in that situation, you Hebrew Israelites, because you're not taking care of your responsibilities. We're not talking about individuals that may be suffering from some type of illness where they can't take care of themselves. We're talking about Hebrew Israelites that's mentally capable of handling their business. They just choose not to do so. That's going off. Okay? That's going off. So this is the type of spirits Yahweh is calling out. The ones that are able to provide for their own, they're able to take care of themselves, but they choose not to do so, all because they want to stay in their sin. And also those individuals want to appear to be righteous, but they're not. Okay. This is the spirits that's being called out. Okay. And this understanding. Because like I said, a lot of Hebrew Israelites are battling with this type of spirit of laziness, of not trying to do what they need to do to be able to take care of their family and also take care of themselves. A lot of Hebrew Israelites is struggling with this understanding. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10. It says, for even when we were with you. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10. This again is Apostle Paul speaking to our people that was living in Thessalonica. Okay. So this is our people of this time being referred to as being those Thessalonians that was living in Thessalonica. Okay. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10. It says, for even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. So again, this is a commandment to the Hebrew Israelite, primarily men, right? But in general, the whole house of Israel, men and women, that we are commanded to do what? To work. Because if we don't work to do what we need to do, we're not going to be able to eat. We're not going to be able to survive. So again, you Hebrew Israelites, stop trying to be overly righteous and trying to put out there, oh, well, the Sabbath come around, I'm not working, even though you're struggling out here. Right? If you're struggling out here, you don't need to be off on the Sabbath. You need to be doing what you need to do to take care of your family. Point blank, period. Now, of course, you do have certain individuals that can have Saturday off or the 7th day off or the Sabbath day off in general because they're financially put together to be able to have that understanding. But a lot of Hebrew Israelites are not in that condition to be able to be off on the Sabbath, or they're not even able to have a job that cater towards that understanding. Okay, because again, the Hebrew Israelites primarily have to go to the Gentile nations for a job. Okay, the Gentile nations were not given the commandment to keep Yahweh's Sabbath day. Point blank, period. Okay, so it's in your best interest, you Hebrew Israelites. You have to do what you have to do to survive. And this is a commandment understanding that you have to work. Okay, point blank, period. Okay, if you don't work and do what you need to do to survive, you're not going to be able to eat. Point blank, period. And this is what the issue that the Hebrew Israelites in modern day times are doing. They know they need to survive, but they want to have the appearance of being overly righteous by them being off on the Sabbath day. Okay, or by them taking a job of lesser value because they know the good paying jobs, you have to work on the Sabbath day. Okay, primarily because that's the majority of the jobs in the Gentile nations. You have to work on the seventh day. Okay. Let's go to the next understanding. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 17 is going to the understanding of loving thy neighbor as you love thyself. And this is the understanding that Yahshua Mashiach was showing those Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees on that understanding of loving thy neighbor as you love thyself. Okay, this is that key principle that is lawful understanding. And this is the key law that Yahshua the Mashiach was always presenting to his people on. Okay, so this is the understanding. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 17. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. So again, thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. And we know those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, they had hatred in their heart, right? Which they was not supposed to have. And it says, thou shalt not in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, right? And not suffer sin upon him. So we as the Hebrew Israelites, when we see our neighbor going off, right, or we see our neighbor not having right understanding, we're supposed to correct our neighbor with the word of the Most High, right? We're not supposed to suffer sin upon him, right? We're not supposed to suffer sin upon him, or we're not supposed to be suffering sin upon our fellow sister or something like that, right? So we're supposed to show love to our brothers and sisters in this walk, okay? So if we see brothers and sisters in sin, we're supposed to correct them with the right understanding, the right information, so they can change their life for the better. Okay. And we know we have solutions to the problem to fix somebody. We can bring it to them to fix their problem. Just like Yahshua Mashiach saw certain brothers or sisters suffering from certain elements, right? What did Yahshua do? He healed those men and women from their infirmities, right? From their suffering. That's how he was applying loving thy neighbor as loving thyself. Because if Yahshua has the gift to do something, he's going to be honest and straightforward. I'm going to heal those that have a good heart towards my righteousness. I'm going to heal those also that have a good consciousness towards my Father. Okay? This is what Yahshua the Mashiach was applying. He was applying the love of thy brethren and thy sister. He did not like to see his brothers and sisters struggling with those type of problems as far as health concerns. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 18. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am Yahweh. So you see this, Israel? So Yahshua Mashiach was applying the loving thy neighbor as thyself understanding to his fellow Hebrew Israelites. And this is what those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees lacked, that understanding of the key principle in loving thy neighbor as you love thyself. And when it says love thy neighbor as you love thyself, the neighbor is talking about a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman. This is not talking about the Gentile nations as the neighbor. This is talking about the Hebrew Israelites as being the neighbor. Okay. This is not Christianity understanding. Okay. So again, thou shalt not avenge. So as you can see, those scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, they wanted to, avenge and try to kill Christ, basically, which they end up doing, setting Christ up to be killed down the road. Okay. As far as him being crucified on that cross. Okay. It says, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people. So again, those Pharisees, those scribes and Sadducees had a grudge against Christ, the black Messiah. Okay. This is why they set up Christ to be killed and set up on that cross to die. Okay. Because these men were not righteous leaders. Okay. But thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am Yahweh. You're showing love to your neighbor as you love thyself when you're taking care of your fellow Hebrew Israelite brother or your fellow Hebrew Israelite sister. Okay? Or you're taking care of your children. You're giving them what they need to basically be able to survive. So this is why I did this lesson, you children of Israel, to let it be known that it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity, based upon this being a righteous deed to do. Okay, because it's beneficial to you as an individual to help be able to take care of your bills. It's beneficial for you to be able to have food on the table. It's beneficial to you to have a roof over your head as far as housing is concerned, so you can stay firm in this walk. Stop listening to these modern Hebrew Israelites telling you don't work on a Sabbath day. You're going off, you and sin. No. Stop listening to these men, because these men are going to have you out on the street struggling to survive out here and all this other type stuff. Do what you can do. Okay? Don't be trying to be overly righteous for who? Who you're trying to impress, right? You trying to impress the leadership. These men behind closed doors are battling certain type of sins, right? So basically, they're no different than anybody else out here. So we as the children of Israel, we have to have a humble heart to understand we're trying to survive. And in doing what we need to do to survive, it's lawful to do on the Sabbath day as far as emergency circumstances, okay, while we in captivity, as long as it goes by the guidelines of what the Bible says. That's permissible to do on the Sabbath day. Okay, Israel. So other than that, Israel, I just had to do this lesson, Israel, because we have Hebrew Israelites that's out here forming doctrines, telling people that Christ committed a sin by him healing on the Sabbath, or we have people that's saying that Hebrew Israelites that's working on the Sabbath day in sin, they going off and all this other stuff. So I had to do this lesson to correct those falsified doctrines from these modern day Hebrew Israelites who are rolling with that ancient Pharisee, scribes, and Sadducee type of spirit. And we don't need that type of spirit of understanding in the midst of this Hebrew truth understanding. Okay? So you Hebrew Israelites, share this video with your family and friends and let them know that it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days while in captivity. So now you got the full understanding of the understanding on why it's permissible to do, okay, as far as a form of work when it pertains to a righteous deed, as far as you taking care of your family, you putting the bills in mind so you could be able to have a form of life, okay? Because the Yahweh is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. Yahweh don't want his people out here struggling on the street, trying to survive, or trying to appear to be righteous. Because if you wind up on the street, you're going to be doing some other things that's going to take you away from the Most High further on, okay, where it's going to be difficult for you to even aspire to be righteous if you're living out on the streets, okay? And these are just straight facts. Just like now you look on this channel on Kingdom Builders of Israel C, they know, hey, Captain Paul Israel, he rolling with the right spirit, because nobody's saying nothing against this man on his platform as far as on this particular subject matter. On when it says it's lawful to do well on the Sabbath days, nobody can say a response. Why? Because it's a righteous understanding. Point blank, period. Okay, because Captain Paul Israel is going to maintain his understanding based upon what the Bible says. Okay, I've been proving what I speak thus so far on this channel. And of course, we got the Pharisees, we got the modern Hebrew Israelites that's in the background watching the content and hatred, trying to, find something on me and stuff like that. I see you plotting, but again, you coming up missing because I'm rolling with the right type of spirit. So, hopefully you modern day Hebrew Israelites will repent and just focus on the ministry, keep everything sound doctrine as it is written, and renew your mind. Come out of that Pharisee spirit, you Hebrew Israelites. Okay? Other than that, Israel, stay tuned for more videos on this channel. Shalom.
Fatality. Well done. Outstanding. Impressive. Excellent.